Day, as we shared last night, I think it was. Thank you, Tanya. Tanya has also made me much more thoughtful of sharing the topic up front. All right. So she asked last week, and so I thought, okay, before somebody asks, let me do the same again this week, and it gives you at least some context and some even if you don't go through notes or anything like that, at least your mind has been framed around what to expect and what it's all about. So let me ask, maybe I'm sure some of you've gone through some of these notes before. In your own words, what do you think transfer pricing is, and why do we have such a thing as transfer pricing?
I'll go first. In my work, I've got there's a few divisions, and you just want a fair price between the divisions. You don't want, yeah. So it's a balancing
Hmm?
act. Like, yeah, I think that's it. And also to determine a fair price between the divisions,
Hmm?
and yeah, and it's an in and a out at the bottom line, but
Hmm?
there's still decisions to be made. Divisional heads feel they don't want to be taxed almost too much, um, or yeah, they just want to feel that they can control some of the costs, and have decisions about it.
Okay, I like a few words that you said there, Daniel. You spoke about control, spoke about decision making. All right. You spoke about fairness. All right. And I intentionally asked for your own words. All right, because it's essentially when you can extrapolate or explain something in your own words, even if the words are not um, cohesively put together, right, in strong sentences, like, things like that. That's not important at this point because that doesn't necessarily take away from you the understanding, all right? Because you've got this experience at work, and so you're connecting that experience to what you're learning about transfer pricing, and that's exactly the level where the understanding sits. So now what happens is in a session like this, we take that understanding and we amplify that understanding and we put some words together so that that words become meaningful for response in a question paper, right? Or in an exam setting or a test setting. Again, it's not me giving you that it's right, because you already have it. All we're doing is reshuffling it and just making it pretty, if I can put it that way. And that's really what we want to do about, well, not only this topic, any topic for that matter. Amira, what's your thoughts?
But it's definitely like to get the group profits, like in line, like the group objectives and stuff. And like if the divisions are, you know, buying from each other or like trading internally where instead of externally, then it's like in line with goal congruence of the group itself.
Cool. Shaheen?
So I will say autonomy is crucial because sometimes you're taking the decision of the lower, like maybe the head office decision instead of the individual department decision, because that really messes up maybe the benefits or maybe the incentives end of the period to end of the year.
Yeah. So what I always want to do is, all right, I laugh about it because generally when we get asked the questions like we're just speaking about now, a lot of times we become very technical about it. We become very theoretical about it, which is great, no problem at all. But remember, I'm always saying, hey guys, this is English, all right? So if you think about the word transfer and pricing, right, it's really the price that we transfer goods at from one division to another or from one company to another within the same group, right? And so that's important because right? Because there's now a relationship, all right? There's a relationship that exists either at a divisional level, a departmental level, or at the entity level, all right? And so a lot of times when we think about divisional performance, all right, when you think about departmental performance, and when we think about performance among subsidiaries, we don't always see it the same, all right, from a group point of view. So essentially, it's when two groups transfer goods amongst each other at a price. In other words, there's no transfer pricing that will exist if there's no compensation. All right. So there needs to be compensation between the two for a transfer pricing policy, or for transfer pricing to exist as something to consider within that entity, within that division, within those departments. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
All right. And so this divisional structure, all right, where these divisions interact, that's where you actually have this transfer of goods between this, or services, all right. When now, again, I'm just paraphrasing, when this one receiving entity must pay the supplying entity for the goods and services. And that's really what transfer pricing is, right? Now, if you understand what transfer pricing is, if you think about it, and if you step out of the departmental, divisional, and maybe from an let me call it the intercompany point of view. All right, think about when we did groups and consolidation. Because of the relationship that exists, there's certain things that kind of has to net off. All right, you can't make a profit amongst each other, etc. All right, and so there's a specific relationship that exists, and because of that specific relationship that exists, all right, sometimes we actually forget about certain core principles that exist because of what we've previously done. So transfer pricing is really not a new thing, right? It really looks at past concepts and topics that you've previously covered, that now you have to just bring together in the context of this new topic that we call transfer pricing. So think about it, all right? When two people are buying and selling amongst each other, all right, if I'm the seller, there's a costing exercise that I need to do, right? Secondly, when I'm doing the costing exercise, you think about costing that we did. Am I doing absorption costing? Am I doing variable costing? All right. And because of that costing basis, that determines how because of that costing system, that determines how I actually get to my cost per unit. And therefore, if I have my cost per unit and I've got my selling price, therefore I know then what my profit is per se, if I can put it that way. All right. So that principles, all right, of costing, all right, those principles of pricing, those principles of relevant costing, those principles of incremental costing, the principles of opportunity cost, the principle of marginal cost, the principle of contribution margin. These are not new things, all right? These are all of these principles that are now coming together within transport costing, and that's really what we want to kind of amplify and show through the session. Now, you would remember that as we're going through this topic, we always this topic and many other topics, we always want to establish a framework. I've said this before to you, that we want to frame it before we fill it. I'm not sure. Have I said that to you guys before already?
I think you did.
Right? But let me elaborate on that topic again. All right. So the reason why I'm saying that is because, especially from an exam technique point of view, we always find that we go very deep on one leg of something, rather than going wide across multiple pillars of that topic. And so we lose the opportunity to maximize our marks. And so I always use this principle of a glass, all right? A glass is a frame, all right? And the glass is able to then hold the contents, right? Let's say it's water that it wants to hold. The frame enables you to hold the content to be able to extract the greatest value, which is to drink everything that's in the glass. All right. Now you could say, fine, I don't need a glass. right? But your next best option is probably to throw the water on the table and then lap it up, right? But it doesn't matter how you do it and what you do it, you, in all likelihood, you won't be able to lap up everything, and probably a lot of it will slide off the table. The point being here that without the frame, you can't get all the value out. And so through this topic also, we want to establish a frame and say, okay, what's the frame? And in this topic, transfer pricing, there are certain objectives that you want to reach that actually becomes your frame for answering this question, particularly when you ask a question from, they might say critically evaluate the decision for this business, all right, to implement a divisional structure, right? Recommend the reasons why you should implement the divisional structure. Or it might say, all right, what are the advantages or the advantages and disadvantages of implementing a divisional structure? And what are the things that management should consider when implementing a divisional structure? So already you can see with all of these questions, you kind of have to say, okay, fine, before I just write down everything that I think I know, maybe what I should do is establish a framework, right? So that I know that I don't miss out on the different parts that I need to contribute to be able to extract the greatest value. So if you think, for instance, and I've mentioned it again, but I say it for the sake of reinforcing it, if you think of some of these models that we spoke about, SAF, suitability, acceptability, feasibility, that's a framework that allows you to kind of explore suitability on its own and add content to that. It allows you to explore acceptability on its own and add content to that. Explore feasibility on its own and add content to that. The same with SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you don't answer a question within the framework of SWOT, you might give all the strength and miss out on giving the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. So that's really this principle of frame it before you fill it. All right. And so within this transfer pricing system, there are 4 primary objectives. And these are some of the things that you've already mentioned when we started this conversation at the beginning of the session. All right. And so the first part of this, or the first objective really is goal congruence. All right. And essentially what this goal congruence means is congruence. The word congruence means alignment. You might have remembered from mathematics, we used to speak about congruent triangles. So the one triangle is equal to the other. All right. And so this is what this goal congruence is. In other words, saying the goal of one is equal to the goal of other. Which goals of one and which goals of the other? And really what we want to find is that the goals of an individual within an organization, those goals, those KPIs, those performance objectives of that individual is aligned with the company's goals and with the company's objectives. And so we find that as part of this transfer pricing system, that goal congruence, all right, you need to find a way where you align the company's decisions, all right, or align the decisions made by a divisional manager, as an example, with the overall benefit of the company. If those are not aligned, you're going to find that the manager is going to pull in one direction because he's incentivized in a certain way. And you'll find that the company will then not benefit because the company's goals is slightly different. And we'll explore that in a few moments. So from a goal congruence point of view, a well-designed transfer price, all right, encourages managers then to make choices that maximize the company-wide contribution. So let me give you a simple example. All right. If Tanya is selling to Shaheen, they are both divisions within the company. All right. So Tanya's cost is 100 rand. All right. So Tanya puts something together, maybe beads, maybe some necklaces or whatever it might be, and she puts all the beads together to be able to make let me call it a raw necklace. And her cost is 100 rand. So now she has to transfer this, call it unfinished product to Shaheen. All right. And so there's now a decision that needs to be made between Tanya and Shaheen. Firstly, Tanya needs to decide how much she will sell it at. All right. So let me ask you, Tanya, will you sell that product at 80 rand to Shaheen?
If I don't have another use for it, if I've got a customer for 100, I'll firstly do that. But if, yeah, so it depends
So
on my
let's
stock.
let's be very simplistic about it without trying to think too much about it. All right. If you are in business, do you want to sell something at less than your cost?
No.
Right. So the worst case scenario is you want to cover your costs, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Right. So which means if your cost is 100 rand, you want to sell it at 100 rand or more to Shaheen.
Yes.
That right? And let's say you want to make
Yes.
a 50% profit. You will then sell it to Shaheen at 150 rand.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's good. So now you are happy because you'd made a 50% profit. All right. Now Shaheen gets that product, and Shaheen needs to do certain things to that product. All right. And let's say Shaheen's cost of that product is 60 rand. All right. So Shaheen, what is your total cost now that you've got to that product?
So you said it's 60 rand.
Yeah.
So
but
is
you
it,
also bought it for 150.
so it's the 150 plus the 60 rand.
Plus the 60 rand. All right. So your total cost is now 210 rand.
Yes.
You agree with me there?
Yes.
All right.
It's 210.
So now let me ask you, would you want to sell that product? Because now from you, remember the two of you are one company.
Yes.
All right. Would you want to sell that product to the external market because there's no more value creation or value added services now or value added processes now? The product is ready. Would you want to sell that product to the external market at less than 210 rand?
No.
No, you wouldn't want to sell it. All right.
Never.
You'd probably want to make the same 50% profit that Tanya did. All right. And so if you add 50% to 210 rand, then you're going to sell it at 315 rand.
Yes.
All right. Because that is what you want to do. You've now set goals for yourself as an individual to make a 50% profit. But here's the catch. The company as a whole, what was the company's cost as a whole? The company's cost as a whole was Tanya's 100 rand, isn't it? And your 60 rand.
My 60, yes.
Right? So the total cost of the company is 160 rand. Which means if the company wanted to make, let's say, a 50% profit, the company will sell it at 240 rand.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Right? But the company might even go and say, well, my total cost is the 100 rand from Tanya and your 60 rand is 160. So I'm even happy to sell it at 200 rand. Right? Because taking marketing factors into account and all of those kind of things. So now can you see, Shaheen, that if you sold that final product at 200 rand and your cost at that point is 210 rand, can you see you're going to actually make a loss?
David, you'll be able to repeat. I don't know what happened. I think I didn't hear some parts of just shaking.
I can. So I'm saying, can you then you can then if you take the cost from Tanya of 100 rand and you take your cost, all right, of 60 rand, the total cost of the company is 160 rand, right?
Yes.
And let's say the company now says, I'm happy to sell it. The company as a whole says, I'm happy to sell it at 200 rand, right, and get a 40 rand profit because of maybe market forces and competitors and all of those kind of things. They're happy to sell it at 200 rand. But can you see then, if you go in from a divisional point of view, you will make a loss.
Yes, definitely.
Because your cost is 210 rand.
Yes.
Now, this is exactly the goal congruent principle, all right, where the divisional KPIs is not aligned with the overall benefit of the entity. Right? And so you're going to make decisions that might put you in a position, Tanya is going to sell to you, that might put others in a position where the goals are not aligned, if that makes sense. Right. Now, the next part of this next objective is performance evaluation. And essentially what happens now is that same transfer pricing that we've just chosen now, all right, that becomes then input, all right, and becomes the variables, all right, to measure that specific division's profitability. that specific division's operational result, right? So if you think about it, Tanya, if Tanya sold it to you at 150 Rand, Tanya is looking pretty, all right? She's made a KPI, she's made a profit in a division, she's all happy. But you, on the other end, Shaheen, you've made a loss, right? Where did that loss
Yes.
stem from? That loss now suddenly Tanya is going to get a bonus and you're not going to get a bonus.
Yes.
Right? Because you were forced to sell it, all right, at 200 Rand, all right, where your cost was 210 Rand. So Tanya is going to get a bonus and you're not going to get a bonus. And can you see then the decisions around transfer pricing then will affect your performance, all right, will affect how you get assessed and whether you make your objectives or not. Again, now Tanya, of course, is going to try her best, all right, to sell it at the highest price to be able to get the highest profit. You, Shaheen, on the other hand, you're going to say, no, this is not going to work for me because, and so there becomes this clash, if I can call it like that, or conflict, or this pulling, competing pulling between these two divisions, all right? Why? Why is that so? Because there's an assessment of the financial operations result that's taken place, which measures then, of course, the performance of each of you as divisional managers within your own department. And immediately you can then make a link then to that goal congruence that we spoke about earlier. All right. The third thing around transfer pricing, and Tanya alluded to that when we started this, is divisional autonomy. All right. And really what this divisional autonomy is saying is the decision lies within each division, all right, to decide what to do and what is best for the division. So Tanya made an example, as said earlier, she'll decide whether she wants to sell it to you, Shaheen, all right, or whether she wants to sell it to an external market, right? Because maybe she can make a better profit on the external market. Now, that in itself is a problem because Tanya, as a division, is going to make a division based on a decision, based on a divisional autonomy. In other words, the ability to make a decision on her own without being impacted or influenced from anywhere else. All right. And she's going to make the decision that's best for her. But making that decision that's best for her is not necessarily the best decision for the company. Can you see again the link to goal congruence? All right, because the company as a whole is saying, but Tanya, if you don't sell that to me, all right, which is Shaheen in this case, that means I must go buy it from an external supplier. And if I buy it from an external supplier, all right, then I'm going to buy it at a more expensive price, number one. And number two, all right, actually, what is this superficial measurement of profit? Tanya also mentioned it earlier because it's really a plus and a minus, it's an in and an out. I showed you earlier that the overall cost of the entity hasn't changed. All right. So this superficial thing is actually causing a whole lot of drama, if I can call it like that, between these divisions. And so that if you don't have a good transfer pricing system in place that kind of balances across these things, you're going to actually find that this whole principle of goal congruence is ruined, all right, and places your entity in a worse position than before. Does that make sense? Let me
Yes,
pause there
David.
for a moment and you can ask me any questions, make comments, make statements. Yeah.
Well, it's making sense so far.
Good. Tanya, you're good?
Yes, it's just we know the problems now, but how to fix it and how to get agreement.
Yep.
Eh?
Yes, yep, and we'll get to that. So then the last objective, which is not covered in much detail in our for our purposes, but is at an awareness level as a fourth objective as part of that framework, is actually the movement of profits between divisions, all right, for tax benefits, all right, particularly when those divisions sit in different tax jurisdictions, all right. So there's a tax benefit that you can derive by actually putting a transfer pricing system in place when those divisions exist in other jurisdictions. And this particularly happens when there's entities, legal entities, that are part of this, of the whole of the group of companies where that has a transfer pricing system between each other, as opposed to what we understand from a division being just a manufacturing and a sales division, or a manufacturing and a polishing division, or whatever it might be, that sits within the same legal entity. All right. So I've already now alluded to this, that this transfer pricing then creates this single transfer price. There's many challenges that now come and exist as a result of that. All right. And then it's because there's a tension between these objectives. If you try and push goal congruence, then you might negatively impact divisional autonomy. If you push divisional autonomy, then you're going to impact performance evaluation. And so there's this conflict and contradiction and challenges that exist between pulling this. And so by virtue of that, you can never have a completely perfect transfer pricing system, because one objective is always going to compete with another objective. All right. And so to answer your question, Tanya, it's not about whether it's going to work or not. It's not about what is the best way to put in place. It's about understanding these competing things and creating an awareness about it, and putting certain things in place that allows you then to meet most or some of these objectives at some level, right? And this exactly then, all right, is where things come into place, where you speak then about a range of prices, all right, that then allows this divisional autonomy to come into place, allows this performance evaluation to come in place, where the supplying division, all right, and the receiving division then have the ability to negotiate amongst each other for a price that both would be comfortable with. So the decision is informed by the negotiation. This goal congruence is then informed by this negotiation, and that really is the place where we try and balance out this complexity, this complication that exists within transfer pricing. Does that kind of answer that question, Tanya?
Yes, and I think I'm not. It sounds like this topic is more discussions more than calculations.
Yes and no, and we'll get into that,
Okay.
because there is a question. There is a question where they would ask actually to calculate the range of prices, all right, that would be appropriate given the situation, all right, for these two competing divisions, if I can call it like that, to start their negotiations from. And that's where
Okay.
this minimum price and this maximum price comes into play.
Cool.
All right.
Got it.
So here's a question. All right. Does the transfer price add value? We kind of alluded to that earlier.
I would
Tanya,
say
you
yes.
started. You said earlier something that about the in and the out.
Yeah, and almost you want a division to have an accurate cost and a complete cost. So if one division makes a big profit and the other one a big loss, you want to balance. It's almost like a smaller companies for each division, I would say. So you want to complete. You don't want to leave out costs because the one division only supplies it. You want to measure the performance, and also, yeah, I think it's almost like small entities.
100%. All right. So you're right and you're wrong, and you're wrong and you're not, and you're right. All right. Because on the one side, directly a transfer price doesn't add value, because, like you said earlier, it's an in and out at the company level. All right, and it nets off. right? And so, because at the overall company level, really you're having the income and the expense that kind of matches to be able to determine whether it's a profit, right? But indirectly, a transfer price can affect value. How does it affect value? Through the impact of the decision making, which is exactly what you just mentioned now, where these individual managers, of course, are going to make decisions that may then impact and affect the value that is created at the overall company level. All right. So you would then, if we move towards pricing, all right, if I can call it like that, all right, because remember we said this topic is not in isolation. It links to prior knowledge or prior topics that you done, which included pricing. And there's different types of pricing or costing that you do, and the one cost is what they call cost-based transfer prices, all right. And essentially, the cost-based transfer prices, right, what essentially happens is you take all your production costs, which is really your variable cost, all right. Depending on the costing system, you could even add partly fixed costs, depending on the time over which period you might add. If it's in the short term, of course, when we speak about the short term, we always say that the fixed cost is not relevant. In the long term, the fixed costs are relevant. But generally, all right, when we speak about the cost, we're really speaking about the variable cost that is associated with that. And then you would add a markup to that. The example that I used earlier, where we said we add 50% markup to that, all right? The other option is to have what they could call a market-based transfer price. Now, this market-based transfer price is basically saying, okay, let us go out in the market and assess what is what can I potentially sell this in to an external market for, all right, and base then my price based on that external market. So if I'm able to sell, if my cost is 50 rand and the external market price is 100 rand, then I might say, okay, fine, because it's internal, I will not sell it at 100 rand, I'll sell it at 90 rand or something like that, all right? So you're using this external market. But very important here is that this assumes that there is an external market for your product. If there is no external market for your product, then then you can't use a market-based transfer pricing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right, cool. So coming back to this calculation that we were speaking about then, Tanya, right, about this range of transfer prices, right, that you then find is that you find that this range of transfer prices that you now have to actually find out, where am I at? Am I the supplying division or am I the receiving division? Right. And so before I get into the very theoretical part of it, all right, Tanya, you were the supplying division for Shaheen, all right? What would you want to do? You would want to sell it at the highest possible price, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? So can you see
if
this
it's
perspective is very important. In other words, where am I speaking from? So if you are the supplying division, Tanya, then you would want to say, I want to maximize the price. In other words, I want the highest price, right? That, all right, highest price that you want to sell, that you would like to sell it at, right? On Shaheen's side, Shaheen, you are the receiving division. What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Lowest. I don't want to pay something
You
so expensive.
exactly. So again, depending on your perspective, all right, already can you see there's a competing, because Tanya, you want to sell at the highest, and Shaheen, you want to buy at the lowest. That highest and lowest then becomes your range. All right, because that becomes your range where you're going to negotiate. Because Shaheen, what are you going to do? You're going to push Tanya down.
Yes.
And Tanya, what are you going to do? You want to push her up. And you're then going to come to some kind of middle ground where you then agree, all right, that this is what you will do. Right? So, Tanya, what would be your starting price? What would be your highest starting price?
Market value, and then
Exactly.
Yeah, lowest is
Is
the
that?
cost.
No. Forget the lowest.
Yeah.
Your highest now.
Okay.
All right, just your highest. All right, because remember, you're not worried about getting it to the lowest, because Shaheen on the other end is going to negotiate you down. All right, so
Yes.
you want to push it to the highest, and your highest is saying the market price, given that there's a market price. All right, an external market price. All right, so if there's a market price, that's what you want to sell it at. All right, because why do you want to use the highest, the market price as the highest that you will sell it at? Let me help you there. All right. You want to sell it your market price becomes your highest. The reason for that is because if you go any higher than the market price, what is Shaheen going to do?
Going to buy it from somebody else.
She's going to buy it externally. All right. And what do you want to do? You don't really want to push it to go outside. You want her to push it to buy it from you. Right?
Yeah, it's a
Right?
guaranteed customer. Yeah.
Exactly. Can you see that thought that's coming through there now? Now, Shaheen on the other side, Shaheen, you're gonna buy it at the lowest price possible. All
Yes,
right?
definitely.
And you're going to say to Shaheen, sorry, Shaheen, all right? I mean, Shaheen, you're gonna say to Tanya, sorry, I can't buy it at 210 rand when I can get it for 100 rand outside.
True.
Right? Secondly, you also going to look at your selling price on the other side, isn't it, Shaheen?
Yes,
Because you
definitely.
want to either break even or at least make a profit,
Yes.
right? So your lowest price, right, is based on the fact that you want to break even,
Yes.
right? So your lowest price would be your cost, right, less the selling price.
Okay. Makes
Does
sense.
that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Because you can't go lower than that, otherwise you're gonna make a loss.
Yes, true.
So now we've got two sides here now. One
Good
is,
point.
right, you've got your side, Shaheen, as the receiving side, where your lowest that you are willing to pay is your selling price, less what costs the incremental cost that you incur, all right, so that you can break even. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then Tanya, your highest price becomes your external market price. And now that becomes then the range of prices that you now going to negotiate when you say, okay, fine, where do we find the middle ground?
Just in simple terms, it can almost be labeled as staff discount between the two. It's not the right term, but it's some sort of discount, or not really.
Well, again, I'm not going to say no to you, Tanya, because if you found a way to understand it that way, right? Remember, we're speaking about understanding it. And if you've created some association that helps you remember how to put this in play, right? And the answer still is the same answer, I'm happy that you go that way.
Cool.
Right? But really, what I wanted to show you here is that it's really already things that you are familiar with, given whether you are a seller or a buyer. Right? And if you think about it, Tanya, again, we're going to throw this in here now. All right? If you can sell this at a higher price outside, I mean, yeah, Tanya, you supplying this, call it this raw good to Shaheen. If you can sell it at a higher price outside, what are you going to do? To sell it to Shaheen, or are you going to sell it outside?
Yeah, I think that the benefit, there is benefits on both.
Well, keep in mind, you're not looking at the company as a whole. You're just looking at your profit, your divisional profit.
Yes.
Again, I'm highlighting this again because that's exactly where this divisional autonomy comes in. This is where this whole challenge of goal congruence comes in. And what we really want is the thinking that you just had now, Tanya, is to say that, no, I'm not going to be selfish about this. I'm just not going to look after my own skin. I actually want to look at the whole company and try and balance things out. Right. And so what starts to happen then is, Tanya, is that when you start throwing this into play now, right, you now may have then some form of limiting constraints, right? Because you might have a capacity of, for instance, for 80,000 units, right? And so Shaheen wants 60,000 units, right? And so, but you've got an external demand for 80,000 units. And now you have to kind of weigh up the opportunity cost of losing a higher profit maybe on the outside and selling it to Shaheen on the inside based on those limiting constraint factors.
David, so I just have a question. So they often use the term net marginal revenue when we're talking about the minimum selling price. So is that just like your variable costs minus your opportunity?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Right. Again, I'm not trying to explain it to you from a theoretical point of view. I'm trying to show this whole thing and saying all of these things that we spoke about is actually that net marginal revenue that you are referring to.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, I just want to ask, so we've got now a problem. No, I just want to understand this. You've got an opportunity to sell externally and internally. Externally, you have the maximum price that you can supply to your customers, and then you've got internally. But so you always choose your customer demand for if you've got a capacity problem.
So it really, again, you're going to look at the limiting constraints, all right? And you, of course, you're always going to want to try and maximize your profit.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about limiting constraints, you always maximize your profit, all right? And so how do you maximize your profit? You look at your contribution margin from external now and internal, and you say, fine, if I sell 100% of it to year, all right, and I don't sell internally, this is what I will get. If I meet this demand internally, this is what I'm going to get. That's really what you want to do. So essentially what you want to do is, all right, you actually want to create this range, if I can call it, between this minimum price or the minimum transfer price. And this minimum transfer price is then the lowest price that the selling division is willing to accept, which is you, Tanya, in this case. Right? And that lowest price that you are willing to accept, would be willing to accept, if I can call it like that, is basically your opportunity cost and any incremental cost, which is your variable cost. So if you think about it, the opportunity cost is the contribution margin that you'd have made by selling it externally.
Yes.
And now you're giving that up and you're saying, what I gave up plus my cost, that's my minimum price.
So technically we're taking what's our like available products that we can sell, and then you taking away what you're giving internally, and then whatever is left, like the deficit from what you losing out from external sales, is that the opportunity units?
That becomes the opportunity, 100%. 100%. Right? So in other words, let me make a simple example. And when I share the audio note with you, there's a very nice way that they explain it, that we've explained it in there, right? So if you have capacity of 80,000 units, Tanya, right? And Shaheen wants 20,000 units, but there's a demand of 80,000 units externally. What you're then going to do is you're going to say, okay, there's a demand of 80,000 units externally, all right? My capacity is 80,000, but Shaheen wants 20,000. So my total demand is 100,000. The 20,000 from Shaheen and the 80,000 from outside. But my capacity is 80. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to supply Shaheen her 20,000 and I'm going to supply outside 60,000. Right? But the opportunity cost is the 20,000 I could have supplied outside. And what that contribution margin would have been, all right? That's my opportunity cost. Does that make sense, Amira?
Yes, 100%.
So it's a lost
Right?
contribution actually.
Essentially, right? A
Mm.
lost contribution is an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
All right. All right. And so that's really what that becomes then your basis, if I can put it that way, for your minimum transfer price. Your maximum transfer price, all right, which is what we started speaking about earlier, all right, then is the highest price the receiving division, in this case Shaheen, is willing to pay. And the highest price that you are willing to pay, we already concluded, all right. One of the elements that you would look at is the external market price. You won't pay a higher price than the external market price, right? And then the other one, which is what Amira was referring to, is your net marginal revenue, all right. And so really your maximum transfer price then would be the lower of the two, which is your external market price and this net marginal revenue. And this net marginal revenue really is saying, all right, is the revenue that I'll generate from selling the final product minus the processing cost, excluding the transfer price paid to this paid to the selling division, which is that part that we were speaking about earlier, right? So in other words, my selling price less my variable expense. Does that make sense? We also want,
So
yeah.
that portion, so okay, maybe we could just add numbers to it and then it might make a bit more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you could give an example with numbers.
So let's go to the example that we used earlier, right? Tanya's cost was 100 rand, right? Shaheen, your cost is 60 rand, right? And the company is selling it for the product for 200 rand, right? So your lowest price, your net marginal revenue, it would then be the revenue, which is the 200 rand minus your 60 rand. You understand that?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Which means then you've got, call it a contribution margin of 140 rand. So you will not pay more to Tanya than the 140 rand, because your aim is to at least break even.
Yes, definitely.
So your net marginal revenue is really your contribution margin.
Yeah.
In your division, Shaheen.
Yes.
As the selling division.
Basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're saying if you buy from Tanya for more than 140 rand, you've got a problem, Shaheen. You start making losses.
Yeah. True. And I can't cover up my fixed cost. That's my moon.
Exactly.
If it's a long term,
Right?
yeah.
Exactly. So that's really the dilemma that you have around transfer pricing, and the minimum and the maximum. So if you go to the beginning where Tanya said, not the beginning when we started speaking, Tanya, you said that it seems like this is all a discussion question. It can be discussion with calculations where you have to support possibly your decision. And one of the questions that you would ask here is, you would have to answer, is this, what is your minimum and what is your maximum that you would pay? And I intentionally explained it the way that I did because I want to create the association between what you already know and the principles behind it, and say, oh, okay, no, I understand this. Of course, if I'm from this perspective, what do I want to do? And why do I want to do it? And on what basis? And how I made that calculation, right? As opposed to trying to allow me to use these words, to be technically correct about something and try and do step one, first do this. Step two, first do this. you're now using the application of your understanding, right, of this topic, but more than the topic, just your understanding of pricing, your understanding of decision making, your understanding of incremental cost, your understanding of opportunity cost, and what it means, and why these things come into play, and why you look at an external market price. Why do you look at the opportunity cost that you are giving up, the loss contribution, Shaheen, that you were talking about, and why this forms part of that minimum price, and why, as a maximum price, this net marginal revenue comes into play, and why this external market price comes into play. And therefore, your maximum price would then be the lower of these two values, right? Because the maximum that I'm willing to pay would be either the lower of my net marginal revenue or what I can get for that on the external market. What I can pay for it by getting that similar product on the external market. Again, very important in this is both from both sides, from a Tanya side and from a Shaheen side, all right, this assumes that there is an external market. If there is no external market, then that can't form part of your negotiation, Tanya. Right? Shaheen, if there is an external market, then it's not the lower of the, I mean, if there's no external market, it's not the lower of those two anymore. It is now actually your, only your net marginal revenue that you'll take into account to be able to decide whether you do it or not. Again, look at what we just spoke about now. We said to decide, right? Which means it comes back again to that divisional autonomy of these divisions deciding, all right, whether they want to do this or not, and on what basis they do this, and then how does that decision impact the performance evaluation, and how does that decision then impact the congruence, all right, of it in divisional goals to the overall benefit that you want to achieve for the entity.
So
Yes,
can there
David.
ever be like an instance where like I think you mentioned Shaheen was the one selling to the external, the final product. So can there ever be an instance where she has no external market?
I don't believe so, because remember, you are in the business of producing this and manufacturing this for a particular purpose.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? But there may not be an external market for her to buy this raw, unprocessed kind of product that she's getting from Tanya.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Because I was just getting
You
confused
understand?
between the external
Yeah.
market from her perspective.
So
So
remember,
they buy what she buys.
there's the input into her process, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Can she buy that from an external market?
Yeah. Okay.
The bracelet, the beads that we were talking about. Is there a market where she can go and buy that? Or is Tanya doing something specific that she needs in a certain way, and therefore she's forced to buy it from Tanya? Not forced to buy it from Tanya, I should say. There is no comparison on the external market to be able to use.
Okay.
Tanya?
I think just things to mitigate the risk between, or there's a lot of conflict now between the departments that we know of that can arise. So I think budgeting is one solution.
Yeah.
Supply and demand from the one division to the other.
Yeah.
The price negotiations is good, needs to be done.
Yeah.
And then also we say demand. Otherwise, and then stock levels from the one and the other. So it's a lot of parts that's intertwined with this also.
Capacity constraints.
Within the division. Yeah.
Capacity constraints, limiting factors. Can you see all of these things, all right? And so you can now start kind of become very explorative in this topic when you're answering this kind of question.
Because I think it feels like it's a advantage and disadvantage question, and a lot of factors that needs to be considered.
100%,
actually
100%. So remember, with this kind of question, all right, you're going to you could also look at, for instance, cost benefit, right? As an example of what's the word I'm looking for, implementing this transfer pricing or divisional structure. Remember what happens, transfer pricing is linked to divisional structure, right? Divisional structures, right, itself becomes a cost. Because, for instance, I'm sure you will come across this in your notes or in the videos in the lesson. All right, divisional structures. Do you have, for instance, centralized finance? All right, or does every division have its own finance? Does every division have its own HR? Does every division have its own procurement, etc., etc.? All right, or do you have kind of a shared service? All right, and how do you manage that? I'm just trying to, before we end this, I want to actually just show you a question and how this question comes into play, right?
David, I just have a question.
Yes.
When they ask us to like recommend a transfer pricing policy,
Yeah.
what's like the framework there?
The 4 things that we mentioned. Oh, well, you
like
mean the transfer pricing? Sorry, the transfer pricing.
Yeah.
The framework there is your minimum and maximum.
Okay, so minimum and max. So we don't discuss like the other.
Again,
like,
depends on the question. All right. So if you ask, all right, if the question is, for instance, asking, discuss key factors that, let me share this, and you can see this question.
Okay.
Right. See this question here. Right. This question says, discuss key factors that AC should consider when deciding whether to implement a divisional structure and a transfer pricing system. And then this is 8 marks. So here, all right, you on the divisional structure, you'll have those 4 objectives, right? Which would be it would be goal congruence, divisional autonomy, performance evaluation, and the other one, which is, like I said, is not explored in great depth, but it's just something you can put down, which is a tax benefit. Of course, the tax benefit will only be when they're in different tax jurisdictions, as an example. All right, so that's why I really focus on the first 3. All right, so that's what you discussed there. In terms of the transfer pricing system, you start speaking about, like Tanya was mentioning about, you'll have a minimum price, which the minimum price would be in conflict with the maximum price, right? And that you actually have to find a way, all right, to come to some kind of agreement between this minimum and maximum, which is then comes through negotiation, comes through reviewing or considering the opportunity costs. What are you giving up, right? Comes through with what capacity constraints you have. Comes through with looking at external market prices, both from a receiving side and from a supplying side. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, but so like how we have like the different transfer pricing policies, like cost plus, negotiated price, market price. Like, how do we discuss that?
So again, that is, as far as I know, that will probably be shared with you. All right. I don't think they can really ask you a critically evaluate between this and that when it comes to cost plus or market price. All right. What will happen there is you will use that information that's provided to understand what the price is they would like to sell it at.
Yeah.
Which means you'll be able to determine the selling price. And the selling price would be
price.
Yeah, which means you'll have to know how to calculate the cost depending on the costing system, etc. all right, and looking at the variable expenses, all right, then you'll have to then say, if this is a cost plus, then you'd have to say, what is my cost, and add a 50% markup. Then you
Yeah.
know that information you will then use to then determine your contribution margin, all right, and how to kind of maneuver around this range of prices between the minimum and the maximum.
Yeah, and then I
So if you
suppose like
didn't know, if you didn't, yeah, continue.
no, I was saying I suppose then we can like also bring in the objectives as well, like in terms of
100%,
that company.
100%. So I mean, the idea is not to go through this question, but I just wanted to show you. You remember this question: key factors for AC to consider when divisionalizing and implementing a transfer system. So what I'm going to try and do by going through this in this last minute or so, a few minutes is just say, okay, fine. How did we? How does what we say kind of fit into this? Right? And if you look at this note, they say this is a suggestion by the manager that should be discussed. All right. You are not required to evaluate, critique the suggestion, but to consider the suggestion in detail and unpack the advantages and disadvantages of the suggestion. And you discuss differs from evaluate, since the discussion does not call for a conclusion, but merely considering the suggestion from various perspectives. All right. So in this case, they bring in things like, is AC's environment suited to divisionalization? Divisionalization is best suited to large companies with dissimilar activities, making it difficult for management to gain knowledge regarding all the activities. Right. So again, this controllability, all right, and this dispersion, if you want to call it like that, all right, decentralization that really helps with divisionalization. Think about having a division, a Gauteng division, and a KZN division, and a Limpopo division. All right, you want that to kind of operate on its own because it's managed in a location, etc. All right, then it doesn't seem to be the case. All right, speed and quality of decision. Tanya spoke about that earlier. Can be improved. All right, because there's controllability. All right, there's divisional autonomy. That's what can happen. All right. Delegation of responsibility allows the manager great freedom and thus increases their motivation and buy-in. Again, linked to performance evaluation already, because there's an incentive to do better, the incentive to go the extra mile, but it's also linked also to this divisional autonomy to decide, right? Time of senior management will be freed up from being involved in AC's operation to focus more on strategic planning. So when you have this divisionalized structure, all right, the division runs the operation, and the head office, if I can, runs all the strategic intention, instead of getting involved in the day-to-day running of the business. See, a lack of congruence is possible if divisions compete against each other. All right, divisional management may make decisions in the best interest of their division and not in the best interest of the company. All right. Does AC have the knowledge or experience in-house to change this divisional to a divisional approach? What are the costs? Remember, we spoke about the cost benefits. All right, the cost of running a individualized company, individual costs of the activities. Remember, we spoke now payroll, admin versus centralizing these functions. Are there current employees and members that can be appointed as divisional manager, or new staff need to be trained? How will divisional performance be measured? That's the performance evaluation. Are there any organizational structures that can work better? Example, creating subsidiaries. Then here around the transfer price, all right, regarding implementing a transfer price, keep in mind, all right, this was 8 marks, but you can see all this, all right, point. You didn't have to write all of them, but you would have at least gotten 4 marks, 4 points for the first part and 4 points for the second part. The second part says considerations regarding implementing a transfer pricing system. Will AC's divisionalized structure be structured as such that the transfer of goods will take place? It will require transfer. In other words, will they be selling to each other? All right. Remember, we said there will only be a transfer price if there's actually compensation coming from one to the other, right? What will AC's purpose be for implementing a transfer pricing system? Based on Mr. Lowe, again, this is the application to the scenario now. It seems to be to motivate divisional managers to make goal congruent decisions and to evaluate performance. There's a performance evaluation coming through. To achieve the above purpose, how will the transfer price be set? Will it be set by management? all right? But if it's set by management, this will undermine the autonomy, because we're speaking about divisional autonomy that they want. Or will divisional managers be involved in the setting of the transfer price? Again, I want to bring in some exam technique here, all right? Whenever you have to evaluate a decision, all right, the advantages and disadvantages in this case, all right, you would find that sometimes, just not sometimes, all the time, just asking questions gives you a mark. So in this case, all right, will this price be set by management or will it be set by the divisional? That's just a question. That's a mark, right?
So
And then
that's
to
like
set
when
appropriate
we
price.
considering something, like when we like discussing
Yes.
considerations and we ask questions.
Consideration, which is a decision, and you can even bring then the SAF model, suitability, acceptability, feasibility, into that. All right, link it to the strategy, right? Again, will negotiations be possible between the divisions? Because remember, this is competing. All right, are they amenable to have these kind of conversations? All right, or is this one manager just an Afrikaans Tanya hardkoppig, right? He doesn't want to talk, he doesn't want to negotiate, he just doesn't want to do his own thing, all right? Or is there room for negotiation? Can we do that? Is there an external market? All right, that's another question. If not, how will the transfer price? Disagreements could be rise, all right? How will these conflicts be dealt with and resolved? Tanya spoke about that also earlier, right? And what will the impact be on the motivation? What will it cost AC to implement and run a
David?
transfer pricing? Yes,
So sorry to cut you off. So just say
that's
we
fine.
have that SEF model. Can you give us like an example how to use a SEF model? I always hear it, but I don't know how to actually use it.
I will actually share something with you after this.
Okay.
Again, remember I said
Okay.
said earlier, my idea is not to keep things. I actually want to help you and see what we
Yes.
can share with you. And now that you asked
Thanks,
that,
David.
I will actually share it. So I've got it right here. This is the SAF model here. And essentially, it's basically SAF, and you're looking at suitability, acceptability, and feasibility. 2-page document, 1.5-page document.
Okay. Perfect.
Right? And so I'll share this as well with you guys afterwards. Cool. And this is really my story.
Yeah, that it made a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you. It did make sense. Yeah.
Any questions? Any comments, statements?
Oh, thank
All
you.
good.
It was very, very good. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think the short story out of this is, guys, it's not something that you don't know. It's building on what the things that you already know. Don't look at things in isolation. All right. Consider all the things that you already know and say, actually, it can be applied here. It is here. Whether in transfer pricing, individual structures, there is decision making. All right. There is a pricing decision. There is costing. There is what are some of the other stuff that we mentioned? Just look at the stuff that I just mentioned. There is where's this thing now? The costing systems. There's relevancy. There's opportunity cost. There's the incremental costs. All of these things are stuff that we've already done. All right. So it's all about saying, well, let me not look at those things. They're actually applicable here, and that's the reason why I kind of centered the whole conversation around these two perspectives between the selling and the buying, and considering what you will want when you sell and what you will want when you buy. And these are just logical principles that you want to maintain as you talk through this. And all you want to do now is take the notes that I'll share, all right, and kind of just formalize that informal thinking into structure and words and frameworks, all right? And you'll do that when you go through the notes plus the audio that I'm going to share, as well as then maybe look at a question, then take a question with that and see how does that work then from here on. Is that all good?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Looking forward to that audio.
Yeah.
I'll share it immediately. So I'm going to share my notes with you, like I usually do, and then I'll also share this audio note with you. And if there's anything else, and the staff model, I'll also share that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much,
David.
everybody. Have a good
Okay.
evening.
Thank
You
you.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.